You may be thinking to yourself, I need to take these steps and someday I want to be a market president like you. Okay, you can, but I would just tell you to focus on what you're doing right now. And if you just do everything that you're asked to do very, very well, as best that you can, doors will open.
Broadcasting from Cincinnati, breaking down business, leadership, and community. You're listening to the What Gives podcast.
Who would have ever thought I'd be back at KeyBank today, sitting down with market president in Cincinnati, Jennifer Damiano. I literally remember meeting you maybe 2 summers ago. I came here and I was presenting to everyone like on your banking team, your professional advisor team. And I met you and you were completely magnetic. And the reason why is it's so rare that I find in banking or in most professions like this philanthropic acumen that is so strong. And I found out your background and I was completely like, this amazing woman is a killer in philanthropy and I love it. And now she's running, this market area in Cincinnati. And so thank you for coming on the What Gives podcast today. And just tell us about like your road from philanthropy to banking, because I think it's a cool story and I want our listeners to hear it.
Thank you. So when I left college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I loved working with volunteers. I had been a student leader at the school that I attended, and I found my way into a job interview with an organization that said they did fundraising consulting and that you would work with volunteers. And at the time, I had no notions. This is back in the early 90s, but I didn't have any notions about what philanthropy was. I actually expected it to be political because that's the only thing that young people at that time would have heard about on the news was that people made gifts to politicians. So I went to this interview and they talked to me for 50 minutes. And they said, at the end of the 50 minutes, if you're interested, then we'll ask you some questions. Like, okay. So they talked to me about, moving into organizations that have great ideas for the causes that they support. And they said, we'll help you figure out how to do it, but you have to get on the ground and figure out how to organize all the people and make something happen. And I was immediately delighted. So I went into fundraising consulting. It was only 6 years, which doesn't sound like a long time, except that I did it in 12 different locations. So I moved 12 times in different parts of the Midwest. I went as far west as Phoenix, and I went as far south as rural Louisiana, which were fascinating experiences to have in your 20s when I wasn't married, and all I could do was learn. And I would do a project, finish it, and then move on to the next project, and I could apply what I had learned immediately. So had I had a different job for 6 years where maybe I'd worked for the same charity all that time, I would not have met nearly as many people, but I also wouldn't have accelerated my skills the way that I did. So I think what happened in me was I learned a great fascination with who the donor is and understanding that philanthropy anymore isn't always about a person's need to give, and it's not always about an organization's need for resources. It's about this marriage that happens between community members who have a vision, an organization that wants to play a part in that vision, and figuring out how to marry those things. And and today, that's operated in such a sophisticated way. So I was a consultant for 6 years. Then I had a chance to work for two dioceses. One was the Archdiocese of Kansas City in Kansas. I was there for 3 years. And then I moved to Columbus, Ohio, where I had worked as a consultant on more than one occasion. I had the chance to operate what's today known as the Catholic Foundation that's in the service of the Diocese of Columbus. Mm-hmm. And I was there for under 5 years, but at a critical time. It was the 2006 to 2010 timeframe where a lot of things economically in our country were reset.
They were.
Even some of the laws governing philanthropy changed during that time. So being in the foundation business was fascinating. It was both legal, it was newsworthy, it was under a lot of pressure. And, the circumstances around public investments were really tough. But I had a chance to kind of see that entire cycle in the course of 4.5 years. I did go back into consulting for a couple years, which ultimately brought me back to Cincinnati. And Cincinnati is my hometown. My parents are not from here, but we lived here when I was in elementary school and high school. And the chance to come back to Cincinnati was really exciting. And to come back to my hometown and have an opportunity to meet people that for me were not strangers necessarily, but I knew their names.
Yes.
And I remember coming into some of the first committee meetings that I had the chance to be a part of. And I thought, I recognize these names from buildings that I used to go to when I was a kid. You know, like these are the leaders of Cincinnati. And to have an opportunity to bring what at that time was my career's worth of insight to bear on my hometown was really exciting. But the long and short of it is, after raising money in Cincinnati for a couple of years, I had this kind of light bulb moment that.
Yes. Can you tell me about that? Because I'm actually intrigued by it. What
Yeah.
was the light bulb moment? And
So, just like a lot of families do, you're growing and changing. Your family's been through a lot of change as well, right? So, our daughter was maybe 8, and I was working for an arts organization in town that, to do it well, I felt like I needed to be there on Friday and Saturday night when people were in the hall and having the experience. And it meant that I didn't see my family very much. And it led to a conversation where my husband said, when you were a consultant, we saw you more, and you were out of town 5 days a week.
Wow.
So now we're living here.
That's an epiphany.
And we never see you. So should we think about something else? And, at certain times in the philanthropic world, especially in a city Cincinnati size, you can't really start looking for a job because everyone in town will know that you're looking. So I made the decision.
That is so true.
I made the decision to just resign, and we had money saved, and we were in a unique situation where my husband, who is a professional, had been not working for 5 years. He was a Girl Scout troop leader, as we were talking about. He had
I love.
He had a busy life in his full-time parent days, but he was also willing to go back to work. So what I did in terms of shifting gears in my career may not have been possible had my husband not been willing.
And I love that you're saying that. To me, that's just such a true partnership. I think it highlights
true partnership,
which is amazing for women that are in the workforce and have aspirations that are high, just like any other male might have aspirations that are high in their career, which is totally okay.
Yes.
And so, talk to us about that, because this is
because I think
amazing.
This is, having a daughter who's 19, I think it's interesting to talk with young people today about what to look in a long-term partner, what to look for in a long-term partner, and having a real partner who's willing to see the environment, right? And say, okay, you're the one with an opportunity right now, like, let's take it. And in this particular case, we were shifting gears, right? And what was fascinating about it was he'd been out of the workforce for 5 years, and he had 2 offers within 2 weeks. So his skills were really needed at the time that we made this decision. We didn't really know that when we were making it, but just kind of on some amount of faith said, like, let's just do this. And I knew that I was marketable. I thought I would find another job in philanthropy, but I had the benefit of what had been a really productive and warm relationship with PNC Bank. They're a wonderful sponsor in this market, very active, very knowledgeable about what happens in the community, and they were also large donors to the organization where I worked. So I called to inform them that I was leaving, and it was going to have a long departure. They were going to do a national search to replace me, so I was going to stay on as a consultant and make a little money on the side, but at least get out into the community and say, listen, I'm open for work.
Sure.
So in that one conversation with a trusted friend at PNC, I told my story, like, hey, this isn't working for our family anymore. I want to do something else. I'm going to pop up somewhere else. So don't forget about me. I know you give money to this organization, but I'll be somewhere else where I'm sure you're going to support us there. Like, I'll be in touch. And he just said so simply, he said, well, before you do that, would you consider joining the bank? And I said, no.
Yes.
I said, of course not. Why would I do that? And he said, Jen, no, listen to me. You know how to do something that is very hard to teach bankers. And I would love to have an opportunity to show you what we do here, because I can see where you would have a very big impact here. And I had enough. I mean, I trusted him. He was a good friend. And I said, okay, well, I mean, I should be open to anything. Like, I'll have a conversation. Everyone I knew there, I liked, right? So I thought, well, I mean, why not? But I'm very good at philanthropy, so I should probably do that. So fast forward, I had a number of conversations there, and what they really wanted me to do was bridge a gap that exists in banking. And 10 years ago, it was a gap. I would say most banks now are very focused on trying to fill this gap, but to work with those who own businesses
Yes.
that bank those businesses with the bank. And during the time that they own those businesses, they usually don't have a lot of liquid wealth, which means that the other side of the bank has a hard time working with them. But the concept is pretty simple. If I'm willing to lend money to this business
Yes.
that's owned by this family, I should be willing to loan them money for a mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
When on paper, they look a little different, right? So I like to describe the two of us. We have W-2 income, right? So when we sit down and we need to do a home equity line of credit, it's pretty simple. We show up with a tax return. We do a personal financial statement. It's pretty easy. But when your personal financial statement says you own something that's hard to value, that's very large, but your personal assets are very small, it starts to get difficult. And so we just really endeavored upon making this as simple as we possibly could. Because if the bank can't lend to the family personally, or help them personally, they will leave.
Right.
And so that's what we started doing. And I loved the work. And what it forced me to recognize, Erin, is that the best donors in any community are the business owners.
Yes.
And
they're tremendous.
Cincinnati is home to several, Fortune 100 companies. We're very, very lucky to have those people
blessed.
here.
Yes. Very charitable.
And many of them are charitable. But often, the leaders of our boards of various nonprofit entities and other community initiatives are the people that have lived here their whole lives, have built a business here, employ dozens, if not hundreds of people, and they want to support and give back. And they end up being the heroes that...
They do. They're great community members,
yes,
community leaders.
Transitioning into banking ended up being a warm hug, right? I didn't realize that the skills that I had in philanthropy were as transferable as they were. And every client interaction I had where I was able to connect a dot for a client, sometimes talk about a philanthropic opportunity, yes, but figure out how to serve their family in a more cohesive and efficient way. These were just magical moments that, created the fabric of a new career for me. And I really, really loved it. And I go back to those early words that were said to me in my discernment process about that I do see things differently. And I became very interested in the idea that I could actually teach this. And I wasn't really looking for it. I think I had gotten to the place in a large bank where I felt like, okay, I'm ready for another opportunity. It may not happen here. It may not happen here, but I don't know. I didn't know where it was going to come from. And when you're a successful person, sometimes you're too busy to think about it. So I was just living my life, and I had known several people at KeyBank here in Cincinnati for a while, and I talked to them, maybe once a year, a couple times a year. And so the call came in, and I remember I was at a Reds game, and it was a busy day. And I answered the phone and I just said, make it quick. What do you need? Like, I just thought, yes. I don't want to waste your time. Yes.
You speak my language. I basically pulled that while you were sitting there today with a donor.
Yes, you did. What do you need? And the sentence was, I'm moving on to another opportunity, and I'm curious if you would like my job. And it caught me, I don't know how many words that is, probably less than 20. And I thought, this is a life-changing conversation. And I said, okay, we need to find a time to talk. And so we hurried up to find time on each other's calendars, and we sat down and had the conversation. And when they said I could be the leader of two private bank teams at KeyBank, one in Cincinnati and one in Dayton, I just jumped at the chance. What's been a delight for me is to learn how Key approaches its work in the private bank industry. I am happy to say we're getting ready to celebrate our 200th anniversary.
So amazing.
It's so amazing. And I would challenge you to find organizations that are older than 200 years in America. There are not very many.
The Navy or the... Yeah.
It's been really fun to endeavor upon this journey, but there are, stalwart brands here in Cincinnati that are younger than that. But Key has been in the business of helping families for 200 years. And today, particularly in our Dayton team, where Key had always had a larger presence than it's had in Cincinnati, we are still working with families after 4 and 5 generations. And it's important to understand that families have choices. Like, they don't have to stay with their provider forever. And in this particular case, what is fascinating is that there are families that have, after 4 and 5 generations, said, no, you guys are doing great work for us. Please stick with us. You know the history of our family. You can answer questions when we're trying to discern what decisions to make about what to do based on our family history. We know that information. And so it's been really affirming to join what for me is a smaller bank than the one I used to work for, but the richness of the quality of our advice, in my opinion, has really risen. And I'm excited to be a part of 2 teams that are equal in size but have very different books of business, and to see us grow. We are a bank that's growing here in Cincinnati. We are hiring new people. We are adding to our team to be bigger than we were before. And we're looking forward to meeting new clients every day. So I'm so happy I brought my career to Key. And, my last footnote on that is just really that the culture is so fantastic. I don't know a time in my career where I've worked with peers that I admire more than the peers I have here at Key. And I'm having a great time.
I love it. What do you think was the toughest learning curve for you? Because just meeting you, I'm like, okay, Jennifer, I know you're the woman that's like, oh, do you want me to run this hedge fund? Because I'll figure it out. Or do you need me to figure out Bitcoin over here? We've got it. Like, you will figure it out. You will learn the subject matter and you will do it impeccably, is my opinion.
Thank you.
So what was the like, oh man, I'm drinking from a fire hose? We all have those moments in our life.
So what I'm quick to say to folks is I don't always have good lending instincts, right? So because I didn't grow up as a lender, there are not things that I just naturally understand, like, oh, we'll definitely do that deal or we definitely won't. And there's always going to be people around me that have those instincts. So that's probably something I'm never going to develop because it's not what I do every day. And fortunately, there are people here at KeyBank that do that every day, so they can kind of fill in those gaps for me. But otherwise, learning about the financial markets wasn't a big hurdle, right? I think because it's a part of everyone's life now. So you're exposed to it no matter what your job is until you work in a place like this. And then all you do is fill in the gaps of the terminology or the philosophies that you don't know. And again, what I loved about coming into banking is you're surrounded with peers who have a lot of experience and expertise in different areas. So no matter what the client needs, I can find the right solution. But what the client needs most, in my opinion, is to be heard. And I think growing up in philanthropy, we are so reliant on the story.
We are.
And
everything in life is about the story.
It's really about the story. And I have an ear for that. And sometimes, that's not been the case in financial services. So I feel like what I'm trying to teach my team is to understand the story. And just yesterday, I spoke with a colleague who'd had an interaction with a longstanding client of ours, but this client was new to him. And he was relishing the story. And he was finding the ways to add value to that client. And I know that that's something I'm helping him understand better than had we never crossed paths with each other. And so I'd like to think that our clients here at Key Private Bank, not to mention the clients that we have yet to meet, are going to have that experience here, because that's what I'm bringing to the table is a great desire to understand the story. Because if we understand that story, we will always meet their expectations and exceed them. If we are focused on just the underlying investments or just solving a problem that exists in this short period of time, they can go anywhere.
Yes.
But if we know their story better than anyone else, or even if we know their story better than they know themselves,
right,
we will have a very successful business. Yeah. And
I completely agree with that. And actually, I would say for us, and you've always been a custodian, KeyBank for us, but even our relationship grew stronger out of really like us knowing that the ethos was there for completely and wholly understanding our beginnings,
yes,
our story, where we're looking to go, where we came from, and how hard it was. Frankly, it took grit to be a grassroots foundation, and you completely got it. There was no lost step in it. You know where we came from and now where we're going and how much quicker we're going to get there now that we're set up the way we are. It's just like any founding grassroots group. And so I think that was also what drew me to you too, is that you listened to the story, you completely understood the story, and you knew how you could help.
Yeah. And I'm excited for the Northern Cincinnati Foundation, right? Like there's a playbook for community foundations.
Yes,
and
there
you guys
literally is.
You could just follow it.
Yes.
And you would have a nice career.
Right.
You would help people.
Yes.
And you could go home at 5:00 and everyone would like you and it would be fine.
Right.
And then there's something about Butler County where I grew up
right
along with you, right?
Yes.
So that's another neat connection between us. But there's innovation. There's outside the box thinking. There are unique leaders that are only in Butler County that have national purview, and if not global, right? And look at things from the perspective of, yes, but can't we do it better? Can't we think differently? Like, this might be what every other community has always done, but why can't we try something new? And we were just talking about this a few minutes ago, Erin, but I'm even more excited about working with you because you're willing to say, I don't know, could we do that?
Yes.
Let's think about it. What can that look like? Why should we do it? If it's risky, let's understand the risk. Instead of just saying no to risk, let's just understand how it can help or hurt us.
Right.
And measure it and get serious about it and move forward, because the reward can be so substantial.
It really can be.
And there's room in our country for us to think differently. And I think we're entering a phase where innovation is going to take on new structures and new heights. And they're lucky to have you, right?
Yes,
because courage is a thing. Courage is a thing, certainly among women, to ask questions, to hope to be taken seriously, to work hard, certainly to earn the respect of the people we work with, among other things. But like at the end of the day, what can we do that's more? And it's not just about how do we invest the assets we have. It's not just about like, how do we find more donors? Yes, it's those things. But like what for me was fun was raising money in rural America. And, you can just assume things about it, but what they have at their core is a great connection to their community. They're better connected than we are in a big city or even in a suburban area. And so I have a cute story about going to a parish, on a Wednesday night in November, right, when it was dark outside and I barely knew what I was going. I didn't even have a GPS. I would have had a map, like on paper. I would have driven my little rental car out there, and they was probably wearing a fancy suit, and this gentleman clad in overalls, very literally had left his farm and come to the church that night to meet with us. And he said, so I've got this grain, and you're talking about the stock stuff. Like, I don't have stock. But what I have is grain, and can I donate that? And it was fun for me. I mean, as a girl that grew up in Westchester, Ohio, I didn't know a farmer growing up, but it was fun to work with this gentleman who was a pillar of the community, who had every desire to do the right thing by the cause that was in front of him. But he had an asset that he knew and could at least listen to the concepts around. If you donate the asset before you liquidate it, then you don't pay for, you miss out on paying taxes on some things. And that's of additional value to you as an American, right? A uniquely American person. And it was just really fun. I mean, I feel like I have been a part of innovation and philanthropy where people were donating cars for the first time. Mm-hmm. Now that's gotten very sophisticated. Mm-hmm. But there was a moment in time where people were asking themselves that question, like, oh, so I could trade this car in, or I could find a way to donate it to this organization who might use it, right? There used to be a time where that was contemplated, or that they would go on and sell it. And then that's actually better for me, and I'm avoiding something else over here, and it just makes sense. I just think I've been here in philanthropy at a time when innovation
was taking place.
And
Yes.
today it's at all new levels, right?
It is at all new levels.
Really where, again, the most impactful donors may be the men and women in our community who own private enterprise, and finding those pathways, and they're not easy, but they can be done, to donate shares of those entities before they make a transaction, because that impact is greater than anything they could ever do. And
non-cash assets all day. I tell people, like, you can give me this check, but really it makes sense to maybe sell or to donate the stock and have us sell it, right, and put it into the fund, because it just tax-wise is so much more logical, so many more benefits.
Yes.
And we want people to continue to want to do that, right?
Yes.
They're like, wow, this was great. And this felt good.
Yes.
Which brings us to our earlier discussion then. What do you think is the hook for some people to donate over others? You and I'm sure, have stories that will shock so many people on also not wanting to be philanthropic. I mean, I have a lot of those stories that really did shock me to my core, maybe. And maybe it was just me being naive over the past 10 years. Because now I see the full picture. There are some people that will not give. And then there are those that are just tremendously generous in our region that I just can't even get over how much more they're giving above the benefit and how much they're doing to make our community better. And I just think that's a learned behavior. So let's dive into that.
I agree, Erin. It's a learned behavior. So what I think I had the notion that everyone gave. And the reason why is, if I spent the first 17 years of my career in philanthropy, I only met people who were generous. And I didn't recognize that until I was in banking, and I found myself in front of people who would explain to me that they had no desire to give any more money to their children. They had no desire to give any more money to their grandchildren. They had every desire to avoid taxes. Okay. And then I would say something softball-y, like, how do you feel about your alma mater? How do you feel about a hospital maybe that you had an experience in here in the community? Is there an organization that you've been in the practice of supporting? And I had one family say to me, oh yes, like, we give this organization $5,000 a year. Okay. They have resources greatly higher than that, right? And I said, well, you've articulated that you have no desire to give additional funding to your family. You have no desire to pay more in taxes. There is a clear solution for that. And it sounds like you are philanthropic, right? There are organizations that you care about. Did you know that you could actually make a gift to that same organization, that you could name a building? Like, you have enough resources that you could do something that big, or establish an endowment, or do something along those lines. I'm just kind of like trying to cast this very wide net of possibility. And they said no. And then I kept going, well, what about this? Like, would you consider this? And in this moment, and I remember it, the client just kept saying no. They didn't say, no, but why should I? Or, tell me more, Jennifer. And I just kept going, telling more, because I was so shocked to be confronted with a person that this was not a value. And so, Erin, in my years in banking, I do sit in front of families that are very diverse in terms of their backgrounds and their stories. And it is a learned behavior. And what I've come to understand is, and this is a challenge for the banking and financial services industry, this is a challenge for the community foundations and the nonprofits they serve. How do we bridge this gap and change the conversation? Because if you do not learn this behavior from your parents, whether they be wealthy or not,
No, right.
Because
giving time,
every person can be generous. It is very hard for a person in adulthood to gain that as a value. That somebody would have to join their life like a spouse that changes their point of view.
And I will tell you, that's hard to do. I'm speaking from experience. Love my husband, but I'm trying to get him there, you know? And it's just not a learned behavior. And it's like mind's blown, like, what do you mean? Like,
And
this is just what you do.
Well, and someone asked me recently, if I give my money to charity, doesn't mean that I'm less wealthy. And my reaction was, actually, no, it's not true. And what we can share with individuals that have the capacity to do more and could do something with great impact is to explain to them that it isn't a zero-sum game.
No.
That when you choose to be philanthropic, you enter a whole different season of life where you get connected with people that in many respects are your peers, or are in industries you would have never met before. So say I'm in the waste management business. I have a certain peer group that happens to be probably the people that are in my industry. And someday I'm no longer in that industry, but I have resources now, and I have things that I care about. Maybe it's a disease, maybe it's a community organization, maybe it's a school, whatever it is that I can then say, well, I want to do something more. I have expertise. I know about operations. I know about finance. I know about something, marketing.
Yes.
And I want to go serve on this board and help them to be successful. But when I do that, I can assume that I will be sitting at that table with people that actually are as successful as me, but we would have never met before because they were in another industry. Maybe they're a lawyer. Maybe it doesn't matter. They've done something else in their life that our paths wouldn't have crossed if not for this common cause that we both care about.
So true.
And I can come to the table and sit in a board meeting for an hour or 2 hours and offer some advice.
Which is sound advice.
Right? Because it's based on
sound advice. You have amazing experience to offer that, and board experience, which is such a value.
Yes. But that people should embrace philanthropy not as a zero-sum game. Like, okay, I have this $5,000 or I have this $5 million and I give it to them and I no longer have it.
Right.
No, what do you get in return?
So much more. I think of that book, what is it? Give, Save, Spend.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's something I'm trying to teach my children is to give and to help them with time, right? And feeling and seeing it. You do get that dopamine hit. And then, also talent other ways. I'm right now serving on Mount Notre Dame's board. You serve on many boards. And then treasure. I mean, 100% board participation is so important to be a leader and to show any board that you mean business and they should mean business too. And this is how things are done for the cause that you're representing, that you're all in. And so it's just interesting. I love to hear you talk about these things because I have been totally shocked at some people's responses on philanthropy. Where it just totally makes sense to donate. And they just say, I'm okay with the government taking this money and choosing. Literally, I've been told that. And I am so shocked. And I think, but you can choose such amazing causes. And
that it will affect you not just in the ways that you described, but I would add to that this notion that it builds your village differently.
It does.
So now you know a whole new group of people that could be your friends.
100%.
And enrich your life and to feel like you have peers now that maybe you were missing before.
Yes.
Where you're going to find them is in the philanthropic community because they're giving the best of themselves in small snippets of time.
Right.
With investments and resources over time. But I would argue it's making them wealthier. And not just in heart, right? And how they feel about themselves or their community, but also usually you meet people that you might do business with, right? Maybe you're going to meet someone for whom, and through whom you might have access to a private investment. You'll find some new
100%.
chapters of your life because that's where those people are. So if you want to stay home and count all your money like Scrooge, and make sure that you have a few
those people,
few more pennies than you had yesterday, then that's going to be your life.
Right.
But you can open your life to very enriching experiences if you embrace this part of your life after you own a business.
I have to tell you this story and I'll never forget it. It was maybe my first 5 years running Northern Cincinnati Foundation. And I had this person call me up, a prospective donor. Hey, I was given your name by my CPA. Okay, can I stop by? Sure. It's probably December. He comes and sits at we had these big office space and way too big of office for me. But there was this big round table. He like waltzes in. We sit at this round table, and he literally looks at me dead in the face and says, "Don't get any pretty ideas about who I am. I'm only here because my CPA says I need to give this to you and fill something out." And I laughed so hard. I can't tell you how much I appreciate to this day the honesty of this new philanthropist, donor. He said, "I never grew up this way. Don't get any funny ideas about me or any funny business ideas." And I said, "You know how much I appreciate your honesty and your transparency." And I said, "But you know what my goal is for you? You know, you're opening this donor advised fund. You know what? I think you should be adding to this every year. So I'm going to, what kind of causes do you and your wife care about?" Mm-hmm. And so then now they're adding yearly since then.
It's so good.
And I will never forget that day where he said,
he challenged you.
Yeah, like I'm not a good person. I don't do this kind of stuff. I'm only here because he says, and I don't want the government to. Here you go.
Well, you bring up a great
crazy.
You bring up a great subject, because I do think that I've encountered in the last 10 years several people who, at a moment in time, were persuaded, usually by an attorney or an accountant, like, you should do this. Set up this account. Someday when we sell this company, 10% is going to end up over there. It's more than enough that you'll be able to give for the rest of your life. And they work very hard to build their business. One day they wake up and they're getting a statement from a foundation that says, "You have all this money over here. Mm-hmm. And by the way, you're paying a fee for it," which is interesting, right? So there's a fee involved in working with a community foundation, but there's value that you're getting for that fee.
Yes.
And, it's a task to gain the attention of a busy person who, sometimes after a transaction like that, still owns a portion of the new company and very busy with private equity and building what's coming next. But they don't remember why they did it. And I found myself in a conversation where this person said to me, "I have $10 million in this foundation. They've taken a 1.5% fee. I don't really know what I'm getting. Should I move it? What do I do with this?" And again, it was one of those aha moments for me where, fortunately, the attorney had done the right thing by persuading them to make this gift. They did not need that money. It's not like they needed to have it back for personal use. But no one had yet captured any of their vision or any of their ideas or anything that they would really like to do. Right. And I think where innovation comes in, Erin, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, is how do we help people that are not affiliated with an organization, right? Mm-hmm. So you talked about field of interest funds, but more than that, like, they want to change things. They want to solve a problem.
They do, especially new philanthropists, which is my bread and butter.
Yes. So tell me how you do that.
So I have a new donor, anonymous donor, and I'm just thinking about this donor right now as we talk about this. They do want to solve something. They want to solve something either that they feel like they didn't have the opportunity of, but they grew up giving in some capacity, whether it was small through mom and dad or through their local church or through their alma mater. Something along the way inspired them. Mm-hmm. And, for this particular person, it was in Cincinnati, the GCL, the GGCL community, which is like the Catholic community, high school community, and how the pipelines, frankly, are showing that schools are dying and will die off if nothing is done, if there are no large endowments in the next, I would say, 15 to 20 years, and for some sooner. And we've already seen that story play out. And so this person said, "I don't want that to keep happening. And let's start here with these schools, and tuition's expensive." And I just think, what a great experience my children had and I had, that I want to provide this opportunity. And also I want to be unnamed. I want to be anonymous, but I just feel passionate about doing this. Mm-hmm. And so that's like a story where you're like, oh my gosh. But even the stories of somebody selling a business and then saying, honestly, I have this one cause, but this is a lot of money. 4% of this is a lot of money. Right. So what should I do? Like, what are the causes? And those are my favorite. And I say, well, let's set up a meeting with the either full family or the couple, and let's walk through what you enjoy. And actually, I'm going to set up some tours, some meetings with the executive directors, and then you pick what inspires you. And so I love that journey and connecting them to these causes, because then they latch on to these causes like you wouldn't believe. And they want to lift them up. They want to get involved. And it all started just with a simple donation of either stock or, S Corp stock, which makes sense as well. And so just to see like them be transformed as a first generation philanthropist, besides the small, like the collections at church of $1 to $5, most people grow up in that way and volunteering. But then to step up to this sophisticated giver is new.
Yes.
And it can be intimidating. And they can say things like,
I don't want all the attention.
Right. Don't call me a philanthropist. That seems above me. And it's like,
well,
you know what? I actually think all people that are giving anything, time, talent, art, treasure, are philanthropists in my book.
Yeah.
It's not a dollar amount.
Community foundations are a place, as an alternative to that, where you are choosing to access information.
Yes.
Right. So I don't know everything that's going on in my community, but I'd like to know more.
Right.
I can still have a private conversation. It doesn't have to be public, but I can talk to this community foundation about interests that I may have or things that I should know as just a person that cares.
And do you want to be called or not called? And the ones that want to be called, I call them up. This is a need. This is what it is. You're open to anything. Will you?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, they do. And I will say this, on average, last I saw it on any DAFs, about 20% is going out to philanthropy.
Wow.
At a private foundation, that's the mandatory spend rate of 5%.
Right.
So much more. So for the whole private foundation versus, this is Congress, right? But private foundation versus DAF platform, still far more is going out to impact. And I will say, just looking at our community foundation, we have not one that sits around and just is doing nothing. We have so many that are doing so much, pumping so much, people that are adding to their endowed funds so they can give more, and wanting to keep it liquid, really, to that gift to just go right back out. And so I think once they find the spirit of philanthropy, they get the sickness, right?
And they know the efficiency and the impact. That's wonderful to hear, because I don't know that every community foundation has statistics like that.
Yes.
I think some of them are actually quite different. And, and I think for a community foundation to say that we're effective and efficient and we're doing good, we have to have numbers like that. And
you do.
And that I hope more clients are considering the option of working with a community foundation. Absolutely. Because it should make them, the whole process of working with one should make you a better philanthropist. And
definitely.
Let's assume that at the beginning of creating a donor advised fund, you're not the philanthropist that you'll be in 10 years. So do you want to take that all on yourself to make all those decisions, or
Absolutely.
Do you want to access information? So Erin, when I ran a community foundation, the innovation at that time was recognizing we were a grant maker. We had a lot of large endowment funds that had purposes, and organizations would apply to us for those fundings, and we would make those grants. And I remember having a meeting with our grant making team and saying, what's interesting is we've received 25 applications this year for this particular fund. We viewed 15 of them to be fundable. Maybe the other 10 weren't quite urgent enough, or they had other means for supporting that particular need. But we could only fund 10 of them. We ran out after the first 10 that we had ranked, but we have these next 5 that we rated as fundable, but we just ran out of money. And so we created a way to turn around and communicate all of that to our donor advised fund holders to say, listen, if you don't know what to do with your funding this year, if you're looking for an idea, these are rated organizations and needs that we wish we could have funded, but we ran out of money.
Yes,
in this particular sleeve. I love that.
We do that.
I love that.
I think it's so important, and we want to do more. We want to connect more.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a couple of fun questions that I always ask.
Right. Love it.
And one thing I want to ask you, and just think about this. It can be funny. It could be not funny. But if the world is ending, right? Like doomsday, aliens have hit, and you're grabbing your bug out bag. Don't include, this isn't your family. Your family's with you naturally.
Right.
What's in your bug out bag?
Ooh.
It's a tough one.
Wow. It's a tough one. So
I've heard all kinds of good answers.
all right.
Honestly.
Well, I like jewelry. And
I love this. I have not heard this.
It's my most prized possession.
Yes.
Like every piece I have has a story.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't possibly part with it. And of course, if I had to, it would be something that I could sell.
Yes,
right?
it was smart.
If the economy fell
Savvy
apart,
trades, yeah.
it would be that. If I had my family with me, I don't know that I'd care about the pictures and the photographs and the other historical markers, but I'll go with jewelry.
Oh my gosh, that's like the most fun answer I think that I've received to this date. I've heard it all.
Make that your answer.
I've heard it. I mean,
What's your answer?
Mine always changes. It's nothing super exciting. I don't know, running shoes, lipstick. I probably grab black. I can't. I need my lipstick. You know what I mean?
I know you can't live without it.
Listen, I can't even go to the gym without lipstick. So I don't know, something along those lines. Good bottle of red, good book. It's pretty trite. Your answer is way better.
well, I think we talked about stories, and I think there's a lot of our family history that is in jewelry.
There, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then another question I ask leaders is how do you start your day? Like what's your routine? I've heard actually all different sorts of answers on this. So I love to hear, what is your routine? You've already surprised me on the jewelry, so I'm loving this.
Oh, I'm not sure I have a big surprise, but I still value the newspaper.
Yes.
So I really try to read the Inquirer every day. I know there's been controversy about the Inquirer. I think it's unfortunate. I think they're an industry and a business that's trying to innovate. But between the Inquirer and, of course, our great Business Courier here, I read them every morning because it keeps me up to date. And
which is so important.
It's so important. But I've been trying to teach my team that the reason people do business with us is not because we have the right answer to the question they ask, but because we know a lot about a lot of things, period. You need to know about the new restaurants in town. You need to know about, something that's happening at city council. Even though I don't live in the city of Cincinnati, I still need to know what's happening in the city because it affects my customers. And I need to care about my neighbors in need. I need to know what the next big innovation is happening. Like, I have to know what's happening. We talked this morning about the arena. It's a very exciting moment for Cincinnati, but we're also a city that has limited real estate. Like this is a concept with controversy. I need to have an opinion about that. I need to know why I care about the outcome. So anyway, I still read the newspaper every day, and I pay for it, right?
Yeah.
Like there are people that wish that all news was free. Well, there is news that's free. You can access that, but it may not affect you.
Right.
If you want the news that matters to you, you need to read it every day.
Absolutely.
And I read it on my phone. I miss paper. Like
I used to love, I always had the paper delivered. I had the Wall Street Journal. I had the
love that. Yes.
In my 20s, and everyone made fun of me because
another reason
everybody
why we're friends.
read online. Yes.
Yeah.
And even the Business Courier in print, my mom and dad still get it.
Yep.
And they also get the Inquirer delivered to
it.
them. I mean, last I checked, I'm sure they both still deliver in print, don't they? I don't think they've cut it yet.
They do. You should ask.
Some have cut.
I know. You should ask what their subscription's costing them. I've heard some really, it's unfortunate. I've heard some really high numbers, but when you consider the low number of paper subscribers and the high cost for logistics, it makes sense.
It does make sense.
That prices are going up, but I still value the newspaper, and I try to read it every morning as I'm starting my day.
So as we a takeaway, I would say, and some people, and tell me if this is offensive. I talk to women on this whole spectrum of women. Some women don't like to be asked this question. So we can edit it out.
We'll see if you offend me.
Yes. So I am of the school of thought that it's important to empower other women. So I think it's okay to say, as a female leader, what do you think was your biggest hurdle, or even still is today, as you are in this large leadership role, which I have a lot of respect for. And frankly, I look to you as a mentor in the
Thanks.
space of leadership with your experience.
Well, we mentor each other.
Yeah.
And so I'm shocked, actually, we haven't spent more time talking about this because women in leadership really matter. My greatest hurdle is myself, and you're a person that is in an industry where you feel a lot of confidence. And there are days that I think it's hysterical that I'm the market president of a bank. Like, how did this happen?
To me, I'm like, you are such a great, strong fit.
Thank you. Because what banks continue to cling to is that the community does matter, and that we need to have leadership that understands the landscape of what's happening, and that translates to our clients and it translates to our business. So I'm living proof that that is a thing. But I do think that the greatest challenge I face is myself, and facing any particular situation and thinking, am I good enough for this conversation? Do I know enough for this conversation? And I've developed the internal monologue around, actually, you are.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of people around you that believe that you are, and you just have to forget about any self-doubt that you have, and you just have to embrace it and move forward. And what I like to say to young women, and I was recently with some young women that are a part of Key Private Bank, but not necessarily here in Cincinnati. And this young woman said, "Oh my gosh, I've been watching you." And in those moments, I try to humble myself around, like, I do know people are watching. And whether it be my daughter, who happens to be 19, or any other young woman that's at the beginning of their career and wondering what's ahead, and finding a way to reach them with key messages that young women need to hear, which is, I never had a plan. Okay. So you may be thinking to yourself, I need to take these steps, and someday I want to be a market president like you. Okay, you can. But I would just tell you to focus on what you're doing right now. And if you just do everything that you're asked to do very, very well, as best that you can, doors will open. If you are sincere in every interaction that you have, that you never say anything that you don't mean, and that you mean everything that you do say, just care about the person sitting across from you, no matter who it was. The other day, we were, as a family, traveling over the Rhine, and my husband said to our daughter, your mom used to get coffee there all the time. And he pointed to Coffee Emporium. And I said, oh, I did. When I worked at this other place and my route took me there, I always stopped there. And I had lots of friends there. And my daughter said, like who? And I said, well, everybody that worked behind the counter, and all the homeless people outside were my friends too. Like, they were there every morning. So they knew my name. I knew their name. I craved the interaction. And she was like, what? Wait, what are you talking about? Because I'm her mom, right? Yes. So she's thinking about the times that I might have said something different to her about how to behave in public. But I think I have modeled to her over the course of her life, like, just be you everywhere. And my new advice to young women, Erin, is to lose the concepts of work-life balance. Those are now like evil words. Because if you get into a counting game with your employer or with your life, I've spent enough hours doing this, and now I have to shift and be another person over here. I think it's a recipe for unhappiness.
It is.
And that the best life you can live is one where what you do as a profession matches who you are as a person so cleanly that whatever hour of the day it is, whatever day of the week it happens to be, you're both a mother, a wife, a sister, a daughter, a friend, a community member, a board member, and your job all at the same time. You are all of those things every minute of every day.
And that's phenomenal advice.
And that you have to walk away from trying to count and say, well, okay, this day I worked 10 hours, so the next day. Okay, so there are places where those rules exist, and they do exist to protect our employees. But beyond that, in your career, try to stop keeping count. And just be the best version of yourself. And when you go to the grocery store, put your lipstick on. Girl, I'm with you on that.
Is it red or is it pink?
I'm in that pinky red category. Yes. I like them both. But that, put yourself together and present yourself to the world the way you want to be seen. Even if you're at the gym, even if you're at the grocery store, even if you're in a bank doing business, right? Like, just be you. And if you are the best version of yourself every day, you will attract opportunities, you will attract business, you will attract, the opportunity to make a difference, and just be you. It's enough.
I know we're going to have to close this out here, but I will say somebody once asked me, are you 100% your authentic self all the time? And I will tell you that really threw me, to be completely frank. And that's what I'm hearing from you to women is own who you are. Don't be afraid to be authentically you. And I can wholeheartedly tell you that woman from 3 years ago that was asked that question, are you your authentic self, to this woman today sitting before you, I can tell you 100% unabashedly, I am. My husband will tell you that too. I am myself.
Even if it's more than everyone wants.
Yes.
I'm unabashedly
That's right.
me.
That's
right.
I
love that.
And so I think that advice is such tremendous advice for women to learn that before. I'm almost 39,
Yes.
and I think at that time being asked that question, I was 35 or 36. And so
and you were busy being what you thought others wanted you to be.
That's for everybody, for mom, for everything. And now it's, you know what? No, this is who I am. And so thank you. I love you coming on the
Thank
What
you for
Gives
having
podcast.
me. I've been looking forward to this.
We're going to have to schedule some time, have a cocktail, have a glass of wine by a fire.
Yes.
And I just appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Erin. And thank you for all that you do.
To learn more about how to expand your philanthropy, please reach out to the Northern Cincinnati Foundation